There is a belief, quiet and old, that when we are born, we arrive empty, a blank page, that everything we become, every fear, every memory, every scar, is written by this life and this life alone. It is a comforting idea, clean, logical. It means the past cannot follow you. But what if it can? In 1998, in a small town in Louisiana, a boy was born to a perfectly ordinary family. His name was James Leininger. His father, Bruce, worked in business. His mother, Andrea, stayed home. They were Christians, rational people, the kind of people who do not believe in things they cannot touch. James was a happy baby, curious. He loved toy planes from the moment he could hold one. His parents thought nothing of it. Lots of little boys love planes. They bought him more. He lined them up on the floor, studied them, held them close to his face, and turned them slowly, like a mechanic inspecting something important. Then James turned 2 years old, and the nightmares began. They came every night, sometimes multiple times a night. Andrea would run to his room and find him lying flat on his back, his tiny body rigid, his legs cycling in the air like he was falling, his fists clenched tight. He would scream the same things, over and over, in the dark. Words that a 2-year-old boy in Louisiana in the year 2000 should have had absolutely no reason to know. He screamed about fire. He screamed about water. He screamed that he couldn't get out. His parents tried everything. They held him. They prayed. They asked doctors. The doctors offered sleep disturbance theories, growing pains of the mind, the ordinary explanations that adults reach for when children do extraordinary things. But the nightmares did not stop. They got worse. And then James started to talk about them during the day. He told his mother, very calmly, that he had been a pilot, that his plane had been shot down. He said the plane was called a Corsair. He was 2 years old. He did not know what a Corsair was. His parents were quite certain they had never said that word in their home. Bruce, his father, was skeptical. He was the kind of man who needed evidence. He sat down with his son one evening and asked, carefully, "Where did the plane take off from?" James looked at him and said, without hesitation, "A boat." Bruce asked, "What kind of boat?" James thought for a moment and said the name Natoma. Bruce went to his computer that night after James was asleep. He searched for the word Natoma in connection with World War II, and he found it. The USS Natoma Bay, a small aircraft carrier that had operated in the Pacific during the Second World War. Bruce sat in front of his screen for a long time, not sure what to do with what he was reading. He told himself there had to be an explanation. He kept searching. At a routine checkup, a pediatrician handed James a drawing to color. It was an airplane. James looked at it and pointed to a small, round object at the front of the engine. He told the doctor, "That's the drop tank." The doctor had no idea what a drop tank was. Neither did Bruce or Andrea. James explained it to them. A drop tank, he said, is the extra fuel tank that pilots release before they go into combat, so the plane is lighter and faster and won't catch fire as easily when hit. He was 3 years old. Bruce began to research more seriously. He contacted historians. He found records of the USS Natoma Bay and studied the names of pilots who had been stationed on board. He was looking for something. He wasn't sure what. A piece of the puzzle. A name that might connect to the things his son was saying. And then James gave him more to work with. He told his parents the pilot's name was James. James, like him. He said the plane had been hit in the engine by Japanese fire. He said it went down near Iwo Jima. He said it happened fast and he couldn't get out. One evening, James was given a small plastic figure of a Second World War pilot. He held it carefully and then looked up at his mother and said, "This is what I looked like." Not, "This is what pilots look like. This is what I looked like." Andrea began keeping notes. Through the ship's historical records and veteran associations, Bruce eventually found a name. James M. Houston, Jr., a fighter pilot from Pennsylvania. He had been stationed on the USS Natoma Bay. He had been killed in action near Iwo Jima on March 3, 1945. His plane had been hit in the engine by anti-aircraft fire. It went down into the Pacific Ocean. He was 21 years old. He had no children. He had never married. His first name was James. Bruce and Andrea found Houston's surviving sister, a woman named Ann Barron, who was in her late 70s by then. They called her. They told her what their son had been saying. There was a long silence on the phone. And then Ann said something that made Bruce's hands go cold. She said that her brother had always wanted to come back. The families met in person. James, the little boy from Louisiana, walked up to Ann Barron, a woman he had never seen before, a stranger in her 70s, and without any prompting, he opened his arms and hugged her and called her Annie. Not Anne, Annie, the family nickname that her brother had used for her when they were children. Ann Barron held him and wept. The researchers who later studied this case, and there were serious researchers, people from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, which has spent decades investigating exactly these kinds of accounts, noted something that made the Leininger case particularly difficult to dismiss. It wasn't just the name or the ship or the location, it was the accumulation. The drop tank, the Corsair, the name Annie, the detail about the engine. Each piece of information had been verifiable. Each piece had come from a boy who had not yet started school. But there is something else, something that most people who tell this story leave out. As James Leininger grew older, past 4, past 5, past 6, the nightmares slowly faded. The memories, as he described them, grew quieter, like a radio signal losing its station. By the time he was 8 or 9, he spoke about it less, not because his parents discouraged him, but because he himself seemed to need it less, as if whatever had needed to be remembered had been remembered and could now be set down. Psychologists who have studied children like James, and there are more of them than you might expect, documented cases going back decades across dozens of countries, have noted this pattern. The memories tend to cluster between the ages of 2 and 5. They fade around 6 or 7. Often they correlate with traumatic deaths in the previous life, violent, sudden, unfinished. And they tend to fade precisely when the child seems to have found some resolution, or when the connection to the previous life has been acknowledged. As if the soul, if we can use that word, needed to be heard before it could let go. Dr. Ian Stevenson spent 40 years at the University of Virginia investigating cases like James's. He documented over 3,000 of them from countries around the world: India, Lebanon, Sri Lanka, the United States, Myanmar. He was not a mystic. He was a psychiatrist, trained in the scientific method, deeply skeptical of easy answers. He spent his career trying to explain these cases away, and he spent his career failing to do so. He never claimed to have proof of reincarnation. He was careful about that. What he said, near the end of his life, was this: that the cases he had studied represented a body of evidence that deserved serious scientific attention, and that the most economical explanation, the explanation that accounted for all the facts with the fewest assumptions, was survival of consciousness after death. He said it quietly, in academic language. But what he meant was, something continues. Now, here is where the story takes a turn that most people do not expect. James Leininger is an adult now. He has spoken publicly about his experiences. He has not become a spiritualist or a mystic. He doesn't sell books about past lives or appear on stages with psychics. He lives, by all accounts, a very ordinary life. When asked how he makes sense of what happened to him as a child, he has said that he doesn't entirely, that he carries it like something he knows is true, even though he can't fully explain it, the way you might carry a dream that felt more real than waking. But there is one more detail that I want to leave you with.
one that his mother, Andrea, mentioned in an interview years later, almost as an afterthought, as if she had told the bigger story so many times she had forgotten how strange this particular piece was. When James was 4 years old, he was given a box of crayons, a big box, the kind with every color. He sat at the table and drew a picture. It showed a plane and water and fire. It showed a small figure falling. He drew it carefully, with the focused attention of a child who is drawing something he has seen rather than something he is imagining. When he was finished, he looked at the picture for a long time, and then he turned it over.
On the back, he wrote his name. Not James Leininger. He wrote James 3. His mother asked him what that meant. He looked at her and explained, very patiently, as if it were obvious, that he had been James 1 before, and now he was James 3, that there had been a James in between. Andrea Leininger never found out who James 2 was. Some doors, it seems, open just far enough to let in a little light, and then they close again, and we are left standing in the hallway, holding a crayon drawing. What lies on the other side? The fire is still burning. The night is still long. And somewhere out there, perhaps, a soul is finding its way back to something it left unfinished. Sleep well.